Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and I am here with my March half wrap-up. I've been reading a lot the last few weeks, which probably means that my mental health is not very good, and I'm just avoiding it really well. I've had some very good books to distract me, such as Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This was so exactly what I wanted. I was a little nervous about starting it because, you know, it's chunky, and I was worried that it wouldn't live up to my expectations or that I wouldn't have the emotional bandwidth to handle a big fantasy. But once I started it, because it was due soon, because other people want it, it drew me in really quickly and I finished it in about 36 hours. We start off with the legend of Chang'e, the moon goddess. She was the wife of a human warrior who shot down 9 out of 10 phoenix sun type things because they were scorching the earth, and as a reward for him doing that, the celestial emperor gave him an elixir of immortality so that he could become one of the immortals living where most of this book takes place, which is the spirit realm. Is that what it's called? There's a handy dandy map, which I made great use of. Sometimes there's a map and it's not really helpful, but this was immensely helpful because there were a lot of mentions of geography and it actually mattered to what was going on in the story. Celestial Kingdom, that's where most of them live. But how Chang'e gets involved is she took the potion instead because she was dying and they couldn't find a doctor to heal her. And in this version of the story, where it breaks off from the original, is that in this case, Chang'e had a daughter. She was pregnant when she took the potion, and so both she and her daughter are immortal, but she kept the pregnancy secret. Our main character is a secret and is living with Chang'e on the moon, away from all the other celestial beings with just one attendant, and nobody can know about her because Chang'e is supposed to be isolated and not have any friends with her as punishment for taking an immortality potion that was meant for someone else. As you get into it, it's more complicated than that, but that's how it's first set up. And she ends up having to run away from the moon when someone is about to discover her, and crashes in the celestial kingdom after riding on a cloud, because that's just the thing that they do all the time. Has to make her way in the celestial kingdom, and fairly soon on she meets someone, and I love her relationship with him. And then there's 3 whole parts and like so much goes on. There's she becomes a warrior working for the crown, and in very much Mulan type style, where she trains for not as long as everybody else, but because of innate talent and hard work, she surpasses pretty much everybody and is the best archer in the whole army, and is just generally amazing and pulls off lots of feats fighting big bad monsters. Her bow is pictured on the cover, very cool. And I love all of that. There is a love triangle included, and some people said that it wasn't the usual type of love triangle and that you couldn't tell who was gonna get with the person in the end. And that's actually what I don't like about love triangles, because they make me invest in something that ends up not coming to fruition, because if you don't know who she's gonna end up with, how are you supposed to know what emotionally to invest in? So that was annoying, but it was in no way was it able to take away from how good this book was, because it was just of the highest caliber of what I like anyway. And there were twists and turns, but also enough predictability that I didn't feel like I was being jerked around all the time, and overall it just made me really happy. Okay, then I read a fair number of ebooks and a number of audiobooks because, for one, there was more commuting to be done, but also I started video gaming while listening to audiobooks because that's something I've really enjoyed in the past. And I haven't been video gaming for quite a long time because I've been too busy. But with my mental stress lately, I found it necessary to occupy myself with several different things at once, which audiobooks plus video games does that for me. It's mostly been The Sims. Let's start with the nonfiction. So I started reading several nonfictions at the start of Feminism is for Everybody readathon, which has started just a couple of days ago. By the time I'm talking to you about this, there will be a lot more about that in the full wrap-up for the month. But the first two were in a She Persisted series, which is produced and somewhat authored by someone whose last name is Clinton, who is the daughter of Bill and Hillary Clinton. But she found mostly Own Voices authors or co-authors to actually write these books. So the one that is about Maria Tallchief was actually written by an Indigenous woman, and so also introduced me to that author. So now I'm like planning on reading more by her because she's written other Indigenous focused works, and I really like listening to that. These are about half an hour each to 40-minute audiobooks, so not very long, very easily digestible. I was looking also in the middle grade section or the juvenile section of my library's audiobook catalog, because this is also middle grade March and I've been really wanting to up my middle grade reading. So I got a bunch from there and will be continuing to read from there this month. But this was a middle grade one, and so it told Maria Tallchief's story in a really kid-friendly, not too academic way, about how she was born part of the Osage tribe that was rich because of oil. This was before they were attacked by various forces that resulted in apparently the formation of the FBI. There's a book about that I've become aware of that I want to read, but that's the same tribe that those things both happened with, that Maria Tallchief came from. And that's why she had the opportunity to train so much to be a ballerina, because it takes a ton of training when you're really young, because she was economically well off, her family was. But then she also worked really hard and eventually played the Sugar Plum Princess, and actually apparently was part of making the Nutcracker a more popular ballet that is played a lot more than it was before she starred in it, apparently. So that's cool. I really appreciate that, because that's one of my favorite ballets. And then she also played the Firebird, which is my other most favorite ballet, and she got a standing ovation for that one. And yeah, I really liked learning about her and her ballet career. And then there was also one about Helen Keller, and from what I could tell from the author's website and such, this author was not Own Voices, so it needs to be taken with a grain of salt, but as far as I could tell, it was informative and focused specifically on Helen Keller herself and her life and the things she did, and what she had to go through in order to get accessible learning, how she became an advocate for especially disabled equality, but also other types of social justice once she became an adult. And I would really like to read, Helen Keller has written some books, and I would really like to read those at some point. Then my other nonfiction was Timelines from Black History. This was also from the middle grade section, so it's also not super in-depth and is very accessible, and I think I want to get a version of this in print, because I think that a visual representation of the timelines would be helpful, and also being able to reread and check all the names, because a lot of different names were reeled off and it was hard to remember them audibly. It would be, I learn really dense information like that a lot better in text format. especially if I then take notes by hand. That really cements it in my brain, so I would like to do that with this book. But it helped pique my curiosity and also made me aware more generally of a lot of things, like the various, I now know there were multiple warrior queens in Africa. I know some of the timelines. I also learned how much of Africa was colonized. Like, I was only taught in high school how colonization applied to America, and even then it was only like how that led to white people's society today, and not how, you know, it affected the people who were already living here. But like, I was definitely never taught that 90% apparently of the landmass of Africa was colonized by various European countries: Portugal, Spain, France, and Britain mainly. Apparently a lot of Portuguese. And so I learned from this book how there were only like 2 countries, Ethiopia and one other country, who avoided being colonized during that period. And one of them was led by a warrior queen who fought the Portuguese. And that was really cool to learn about. And then I learned a lot about various civil rights workers in the US who started working before even the Civil War. And like, a lot of these people, I had heard their names a little bit, but I didn't know like nearly as much about the what they accomplished and how they interacted with other civil rights leaders. So I got a lot of that, how they interacted with each other, more in this. Oh, I didn't write down, I also read Child of the Civil Rights Movement, or Child of the Civil Rights Era, which is another 30-minute or so nonfiction about Martin Luther King's niece and her perspective. She was 4 when the Selma to Montgomery March happened, and so she wrote a kind of her perspective on that and how that happened, and like the dinners that she would have with her mom and dad and aunt and uncle, and how having them talk about civil rights when she was so young was formative to her. So that was I really like that as well. Let's talk about the 2 romances that were left over from last month that I read this month. One was Couldn't Ask for More. This is about a fashion designer and a clothes producer executive falling in love when they know each other a little bit from he is her brother's friend, so they've met a little bit and socialized just a little bit, and then she hires him to produce her clothing line, and also asks if he could be her pretend fiance, because somebody else in her company said that she had a fiance, to prove that her clothes that were, the tagline is "Dare to be Demure," could attract a man, which is so messed up. That's where we get the fake fiance trope that leads to a real romance. This was fairly enjoyable. I liked there was several side plots. One was about the guy mentoring kids and getting them involved at his company as interns, paid interns. And there was another about her sister being in an abusive relationship and wanting to get out of it. And I really liked the side plots almost as much as I like the main plot. And I tend to enjoy when that happens. Then there was Alone with You, which is a novella set in the rural Montana near mountains. I think a lot of Montana is mountainous, but it's about a photographer who comes and starts taking pictures for a local museum, and a woman who just got out of a divorce. Does she have a job? Yes, she's just starting out as a t-shirt printer. What is that called? There's a particular name for it, but it's where you make a design on a computer and then you print it on big scale. She's just starting out a company that does that. And they both have kind of complicated, their parents don't think they're good enough problems, and they work through those. And yeah, that was just a fun little story. A NetGalley arc that I got was Wash Day Diaries, which is a graphic novel, very prettily illustrated. There's a lot of pink tones. which I always like. And we got to see 4 characters go through wash days. One of them was washing their grandmother's hair, and the rest were having their own hair washed. It was about them bonding through the act of, because they all pretty much got help with it. So there was bonding through the act of washing or doing another person's hair, and also there's a little bit of what was going on in their lives otherwise and how they were dealing with that by talking to each other and lifting each other up. These are 4 friends. There was one downside to this. I felt like one of the characters is shown as having depression, and one of her friends is super dismissive of that and wants her to like use crystals to help with it, and is actually negative about the depressed character thinking about going on meds, which it was not challenged nearly enough for me. Like, the depressed person kind of has a look on her face like, I don't think that's gonna work, but I felt like something that important and that easily misunderstood, and that there is a stigma about using meds for, should have it clearly stated that there is nothing wrong with taking meds for depression, and that if you want to use crystals in addition to your meds, that's one thing, but it's not more shameful to use meds than to use homeopathic remedies. But other than that, I really liked it. Oh, and another romance, Chris and Devon. Devon and Chris plan a wedding. This was very cute. I like this a lot. It is a fake fiancés again trope, but this one is one where they're being fake fiancés for a show, and if they make it to the end of 6 weeks and get up to the altar, or wherever they're getting married that doesn't have an altar, with their family still believing that they are actually engaged even though they only met at the beginning of the 6 weeks and were set up by the show, then they get like $100,000 each. And so the whole premise is about lying to your family. They each had their own reasons that made it not like, I'm lying to my family for money. One of them was actually looking for love on the show, and she tells the other characters this right away. She tells her love interest this right away. And the other one was looking for a way to come out to her family while having backup of this whole show, because this is the queer edition of this show. Everybody on this season is a queer couple of some kind. And so I was worried the whole time about, is this going to destroy these people's relationship with their families? Because personally, if I lied to my family about something that important, about getting married, I would never expect them to trust me again. And also, I probably couldn't do it because my emotional intimacy with these people is important. But yeah, other people are able to have emotional intimacy with people while lying to them, and I just don't get that. The way the book handled it kind of avoided that problem, because they end up having a real relationship. And so it's like, we're not really lying, we actually do love each other, and we were only dishonest for like the first week when we weren't in love. And yeah, so I didn't like that aspect, but everything but that I really liked. They had a really sweet relationship, and I liked their relationships with their family if you just ignore that whole lying thing. Then a few more middle grade audiobooks. Katie and the Cupcake Cure is about 4 hours long, and it is a story of a girl who is rejected at school by her best friend, who joins the Popular Girls Club, which is a self-named club, which fortunately is made fun of in the text, because if you have to say you're popular, you might not be actually that popular. And it's basically because she's not hitting puberty or reacting to puberty quite as soon or in the same way, which is a thing that a lot of neurodivergent kids tend to do. Her interests are the same as they were the year before, instead of morphing into being about boys and makeup. And so what she's really into is cupcake making. And so she brings a cupcake to school and sits with some other people who don't really have many other friends around. They see her cupcake, and she promises to bring more the next time so they can share, and she does. And this is the start of the Cupcake Club, where they trade off making cupcakes every week, and eventually bake cupcakes for a fundraiser for their school's dance. And it's just really cute and is about bonding over baking. It combats the not like other girls trope that it could go into because of the whole not into boys and makeup thing, by having one of the character's new best friends be into that stuff, but also be someone who's not a jerk to people who aren't into it. Ed is a member of the Cupcake Club and is capable of caring about both fashion and being a decent human being. This shirt, by the way, doesn't just say autistic in big letters, it says autistic and loving it. It'd be a little weird if it was just just the capital letters. So yeah, that was really cute. And then there is a whole series about them, so I might read more of those in the future. Amina's Song is about a young Pakistani girl. This is a sequel, but you don't have to have read the first book because I didn't. It starts off with her being in Pakistan and shopping with her cousins and like getting to know their culture and getting to know her family, because they live half a world away and plane tickets are expensive, so she doesn't meet them very often. And so it's about her bonding with them and then going back to America and spending time with her other friends and having a project in school that is about teaching your other classmates history by picking a person from history who affected positive change. And she talks about Malala Yousafzai and does a lot of research on her. And the kids' reaction to this is to think that Pakistan is a terrible country because girls are getting attacked for wanting to have education, and so she wants to inform them that it's not actually all that way. There was a particular group that was doing that, and people have fought back against them, and things are actually pretty good there right now. So it's about like her educating herself about that and then educating her classmates about that, and also about her learning to embrace her love of music and that it's not something she needs to just keep to herself. She can actually show other people, and it's a positive gift she can give to people, and that was really nice. And that one I got into for the feminism readathon. Then Root Magic I was reading at the beginning of the month. I've been wanting to read this for a while. I saw it a while ago. For some reason I didn't think it'd be creepy, even though it has a cover that is very much reminiscent of the Jumbies, like the dark forest and the kid in the middle, and that was creepy. But this was even creepier, I think. Like, it gave me the heebie-jeebies when I was driving in my car in the daylight, which usually my car is like my safe space. I feel totally isolated from the world around me and like I'm in a nice safety box, but I got creeped out while I was in there. So I really liked the magic. There were multiple magical doll-like things, which is one of my, you could call it a phobia probably, because of some horror scary things that I've seen, specifically episodes of Buffy and any other time they make a reference to a possessed doll and or marionette. So that really helped to give me the scary feelings, but there were a lot of other scary stuff too. But I really liked the main character's relationship with her brother and also with this friend she meets at school. I really liked how that worked out, and there was a lot of learning about what root magic is, which I think that root magic is the magic that was non-European magic that was referenced in Legendborn. But I might be remembering that wrong because I read it at least a year ago. But this is an actual practice that African Americans perform that is based on practices from Africa. And I'm sure people still practice it today. This is set in the 60s. And so it was really interesting to hear them talking about root magic and also talking about Martin Luther and President Kennedy. Yeah, overall it was really cool. I really enjoyed it. Even though I don't like being creeped out, the rest of it more than made up for those aspects. Then A Bird Will Soar, which I grabbed because it has an autistic main character and is from the autistic main character's perspective, not the family's perspective. Which it was written by the mom of an autistic person, but the way she phrased things in the foreword and some other stuff that I found online, she might also be autistic, because she talked about wishing she had something like this when she was a kid. So this kid is diagnosed as autistic, so he knows and his family knows, and his school counselor knows, and his school counselor is actually a decent person who has had good education on autistic kids and actually treats them helpfully, and is apparently based on a real life counselor who is actually helpful to the author's son in school. So that was really cool. And also a most likely neurodivergent scientist is involved in the kid's life because he has a special interest in birds, and she is there's a sciencey word for it like aviary, but she's a bird refuge scientist specialist who rescues wild birds and rehabilitates them. So he finds a baby eagle whose whole nest has crashed down, and calls for her, and she comes and rescues the eagle, and he is involved in the eagle's rehabilitation. And that's really cool. And other complications are that he lives on a property with his mom that is actually owned by his neighbors, who are like, I think are actually related to her, but maybe not, who are, which is Emmett and Oscar or something, who are a gay couple. The one who isn't Emmett's sister moved in with them, because they needed help with something, or she needed help. They have a really sweet found family dynamic. The main character's father is not in the picture at the beginning because the kid doesn't know why. Wherever they live, they have tornadoes, and a tree gets knocked into their house, and his dad comes back to help rebuild the house because he owns a building company, so he can do it at cost. And then everything gets really complicated emotionally, and there's a lot of change going on, which a lot of autistic people have a lot of troubles with. It has my seal of approval. It was a good autistic rep. Any ableism that came up that I could find was challenged and dealt with. The last book to talk about is This Poison Heart, which I finally got to. I've been wanting to for quite a while. But I'm actually glad that I put it off because we're now closer to when the sequel is going to come out. It's a duology. I loved it so much. When I read Kaylin Bayron's first book, I was kind of disappointed because it was highly anticipated. It was a Cinderella retelling, which I really like. It was queer, and it had a lot of really cool elements, but I felt like the prose was really awkward and choppy. But the prose in this book was totally great. There was no awkwardness. I was totally immersed. So either better editor did their job, or just Bayron's craft really improved a lot dramatically in like a year from one book to the next. But it was so good. Partially, of course, I enjoyed it because I love plant magic, and it's a ton of plant magic, but also it was just the characters and the magic system and the cool creepy old house with the secret doors and everything like that. I loved all of that. And the mysterious little town with the weird little people. That was just a lot of fun. And I got very emotionally invested, so I'm like, I need the next book now, please. Also excited because this goes on my list of like plant magic books that I'm gonna eventually make a recommendation video about, because it's one of my favorite types of magic. So yeah, I had a really good first half of the month reading wise, and have a bunch of books on my list that I hope to enjoy the second half. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!